store. Today's episode of Killer Biographies is brought to you by Rapid City Laundry, located at 312 Main Street, with free pickup and delivery to Ashland Heights, Box Elder, and Somerset. This month only, mention Killer Biographies to receive 15% off all dry cleaning or fluff and fold orders, comforters and decorative drapery excluded. Rapid City Laundry, experts in fabric care and keeping the Rapid Valley stain-free since 1928.
We're back. We made it.
We did.
Episode 3.
Wow. All the way up to 3.
Some people questioned the whole concept, Killer Biographies.
A lot still do.
But here we are just tripping along. We're about to lay down number 3. I've already started thinking about what next season is. You know, we've done Killer Shipwrecks, Killer Biographies. Then what?
You know, I've come across a couple of shipwrecks that have me excited about doing Killer Shipwrecks again.
My son said, well, the Killer Biographies, were you worried, that people would think, these are biographies of killers and, you'll get a bunch of true crime people? And I said, I'm not really worried about getting a bunch of accidental listeners. Like, that would be awesome.
Right. Maybe it's a marketing tactic, inadvertent marketing tactic.
I agree. Let me ask you a question. This week it's my turn to present. And just to get us started, are you a 1968 baby like I am?
I am indeed.
I'm fascinated by the 60s. The thing that I can't get over is the number of political assassinations in the 1960s.
Notorious for a lot of turmoil, because 1968 in my hometown was where the Democratic Convention was. The footage of that event didn't paint the Chicago police in the best light.
It's like now if I'm worried, like, oh yeah, we're about to have a civil war in America, I think, it must have felt that way in the 1960s. Like, what is going to happen?
What could happen next?
People keep getting shot.
Well, not just people, but like iconic figures left and right.
Yeah.
Not to mention Vietnam.
Yeah. It just felt like it was all coming apart. There's the anti-war movement. There's, civil rights. There's women's rights. There's...
Are you referencing 1968 as sort of compare and despair? Like, it's worse now? Or are you referencing it like, well, I mean, it's been bad before, so even though it might appear bad now, there will be better days.
That's what I'm saying.
Good. Yeah, because we want to be uplifting. Yeah.
When I'm feeling pessimistic and worried, I say, you know what? I bet it felt horrendous in the 1960s. And like we were on the verge of, what do I know?
Right.
Let me run through some of the big political killings that happened that decade to give you a quick idea.
Great way to kick off the show, by the way.
Yeah. Well, this is for our younger listeners,
or those interested in true crime and this type of thing.
Perfect. And we didn't even plan that out.
Not
June
at all.
1963, the civil rights activist Medgar Evers is killed in Mississippi. November 1963, so that same year.
We know this.
President Kennedy, November 22nd. 2 years after that, or more like a year and a half, Malcolm X is shot to death. And then the year of our birth, April of 68, you have Martin Luther King. June of 1968 in Los Angeles, you have the presidential candidate Bobby Kennedy. And then in December of 1969, lesser known, but a very promising young leader in your hometown, Fred Hampton, gets shot to death by the police.
Not familiar with Fred.
Well, the reason I list all these is I want to go back to the very first name on that list, Medgar Evers.
Yes.
To me, he and Fred Hampton on the other end of that list, they're kind of bookends, and they're people that don't get as much press. And I feel like, MLK and Malcolm X sort of years later, those are the two that we talk about.
You are correct.
So I'm going to remedy that, at least as far as Medgar Evers. I'm going to tell you today about Medgar Evers because he's a remarkable man. We're going to go through it. Hopefully we're going to learn some stuff, maybe be inspired, horrified, run the whole gamut.
Wow.
Now, how does that sound?
That sounds incredible because Medgar Evers is one of those iconic names that you associate with the civil rights movement. And so he's a big name, but yet I confess I don't know much about him.
Yeah, I didn't know a damn thing about him, and that's a me problem. Now, also because I have an interest in names. Medgar, the name Medgar,
Yes.
is a variant of the name Edgar,
Okay.
and the meaning of Edgar, going back in Anglo-Saxon times, is lucky spear or the spear of prosperity.
Wow. That's what
How
Edgar
about
is known for.
Edgar and Medgar?
Got it.
They're two variants of the
Okay.
same name.
Wow. Cool. Okay. I like it.
It's also a nice name because it's got that sound, Medgar Evers. It's just
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice attachment to Edgar. You know what I mean? Like Edgar,
yeah.
you're almost like saying egg. When you put the M there, you've got Medgar. That sounds good.
Yeah. The other thing that I knew about him before I did my research was he had that handsome guy, but he had that like pencil mustache, that like super thin mustache that's
Yeah.
down by like right above the lip.
Yeah, you have to be super suave to pull that off.
Oh, this guy was handsome.
Right.
Okay, so let's go through some of the basics about Medgar. He is born on July 2nd in 1925 in Decatur,
1925.
Mississippi.
Okay.
Decatur, Mississippi. I feel like
Okay.
there's a well-known Decatur somewhere else, maybe Georgia,
And
but
there's one in
that's not
Michigan.
this.
But so
Really?
1925 in Mississippi.
In Mississippi.
Okay.
He's the third of 5 children.
Mhm.
His dad is James. His mom is Jessie.
Okay.
And his dad is sort of like a old school, like hard ass,
Ooh.
just like real strict head of household, like hardworking guy, works in a sawmill, also, he has a tiny piece of property that he runs as a farm. And he's very proud man, very principled man. And back then in Mississippi, obviously race relations
Not
were
good.
not good. Fraught,
Right.
you might say.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a scary
And
time.
lots of people had different strategies. If you're an African American in that situation, it's like, what pose do you want to take in relation to white people? And this guy was the type to sort of push it right up to the edge. Like, this guy would not back down from anybody, which was especially sort of impressive or terrifying if you're part of his family.
Mhm.
Because back then, people could get lynched for nothing, for an alleged, like, oh, this African American kid winked at a white woman in town, and maybe he didn't even,
Right.
and then that person is, tortured and murdered. So the fact that Medgar's dad, the reason I mention this is the dad is clearly a role model and is a formative influence.
Yeah. Well, a survivor too, probably has like great instincts and just like, hey, you got to do it my way.
Yeah, there's one sort of tense exchange one time where the dad is in a store and he's going to pay off a debt or, what he owes at the store. And the man gives him, quotes, a higher number than what James understood he owed.
Uh-oh.
And the guy says, no, it's $1.80 or whatever. And James says, well, Jessie, my wife, told me it was $1.30, for example. And the guy says, so are you calling me a liar?
Uh-oh.
And the guy like reaches for a knife or something. And James just says, I'm not calling you anything. I'm just telling you, I trust my wife. Absolutely. She told me it's this amount. But at the same time, he's saying that, he reaches for an empty like Coke bottle and breaks it just so that he's armed. So it's a very tense moment. He gets away from that, but he does not. A lot of times after, even just an interaction like that, that's a death warrant. Because then the word goes around in the white community, like, oh, God, he had air, he was coming on, he was putting on airs, he was, getting uppity or whatever. Okay. The other formative thing in Medgar's youth, apart from his dad, is there's a family friend who, again, for some trivial or alleged like misstep, does get lynched.
Oof.
And what they would do with these lynchings is, it's a public spectacle. It's
The fact that this happened and like, my grandparents were alive. Like, what? This was happening in our country?
Yeah.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, my grandfather was 25
I
then,
thought you were gonna say your grandfather was in attendance at one of these things. That
My
would be
grandfather was in
horrific.
Mississippi. No, I mean, it's truly it's insane, and and the behavior, these lynchings were like almost like a festival atmosphere, like a public
Unbelievable.
spectacle, and
Unbelievable.
it was like entertainment, and they would even cut off pieces of the
Oh
body,
my
and, those
god.
would be trophies passed around. Just
What?
incredible bloodlust. Anyway, and so Medgar, he's quite young, and the other thing that would happen with these lynchings is they would leave the body up in a public spot, and then even eventually when the body comes down, in this one case, they left the clothes on the fence. It was like a reminder, like, this is what happened to this guy. And so the rest of, it really is like a reign of terror. It's like a strategy of terror. Like, how do you keep a population subjugated? Like, one way is to terrify them. And it certainly,
Nightmare.
Medgar
It's a living
was
nightmare.
terrified by
Right.
it. Yeah. He said to his dad, "What did he do?" And the dad said, he had the wrong color skin, basically. But Medgar is a tough dude, and he does take after his dad. He's very well organized. He pays attention to his appearance. He always has clean clothes. When World War II breaks out, he immediately enlists in the army. That's another important thing for him. He's serving in a black unit, which is active in France. He is part of the Normandy landings. He's not doing so much combat. It's more like support of combat unit. His experience is, look, there's still plenty of racism in the army. It's not like everybody, but it's the first time he meets also some white people from other areas who take him fully seriously as an equal. And there's one guy in particular who says, "Oh, it's very important when you get home, you should go to college. It's just very key to having the kind of life you want. You got to make sure you go to college."
Well, that's why all those jazz musicians, they said when they got to France, it was like, oh, wait, now we're treated like normal people. Like, this is great.
You nailed it. France. I did not know this about France, but that was the other thing. He gets to France, and he not only does he date a white woman there with the full blessing of her family. He said, for this white woman's family, I was an American first, I was a soldier second, and then I was a black man third. Like, it just wasn't. And that is a radical
Right.
shift in his perception. He's like, he just didn't realize there were parts of the world where white people would treat you no differently. But it does get his mind thinking, well, why is this? Like, so it is possible for things to be different in America, but like, why aren't they? And the other thing is, for a lot of black service members coming back from the war, it was part of the sort of trajectory toward the civil rights movement. Like, well, what the hell? We just served in the
No,
army.
he was in the
Like,
Normandy
we just
invasion.
fought for the nation.
He gets everything.
Yeah. So we're not really psyched about going back to second-class citizen. So that leads us to our next development in his life. He attends college in Mississippi, which then was called Alcorn Agricultural and Mechanical College. Today it's Alcorn State University down in Lorman, Mississippi. And he's a total star there. He runs track, plays halfback on the football team. He's active in student government and debate, meets a very cute young woman named Myrlie, Myrlie, last name Beasley. And the other thing that's interesting is, a lot of these soldiers who are coming back from war, not only have they seen incredible things, like he's seen a lot of death already, then they're on a college campus interacting with kids who are 18, 19, who don't know jack.
Right.
And you're older and you're a full grown man at that point. And so he's a complete star there. He excels at everything he does. He excels academically. To him, college is easy compared to
Normandy, I can barely make it through one of those movies. I'm not talking about being there in person.
Is Normandy, is that Saving Private Ryan?
Yes.
Is that Normandy?
Yes, among others, by the way, right? There's a lot of movies where you see the invasion and how incredibly frightening it is.
Oh my God.
Especially when you see
that
the real
movie.
footage. It's like, no thanks. That's a horror movie.
Yeah. And remember, guys are getting shot before they even get out of the boat. Like, stepping out of the boat, they're already getting shot.
Inside those boats, it was a bloodbath.
And then other guys just stepping out with all their gear and drowning. just drowning under the weight of their gear. But let's not dwell. So from 1948 to 1952, he's at Alcorn. He, as I said, he distinguishes himself. It looks like as maybe his junior year, 51, he marries Miss Merle
No way.
Beasley. Yes.
Oh, so they really got along.
They really got along. And when he does, he goes back to his house, and his mom brings a shoebox out, and she says, we need to
bury the parakeet.
We need to bury the parakeet. And this too was a formative influence. No,
I'm so sorry to tell you.
It's a shoebox full of the letters because he had corresponded for months afterwards with the French woman. And his mom back in Mississippi says, that's cool. You had your fling, but now we have to throw away these letters.
Whoa.
Your life is with Merle now. And so we need to put this, you need to get rid of this.
Well, first of all, why does his mom have access to his personal letters? That seems like my mom can't look at my email.
It's not like families today where everybody's got like, oh, and my kid's over in an apartment and this kid's in a, like, that's his home. Like,
but was she looking at his personal stuff? I mean, you can still respect someone's privacy even in close quarters, right? Like, I wouldn't be looking through someone's personal effects. Like if they're staying at my house.
Maybe he shared
it's not free reign.
I don't know the state of his relationship with his mom, but she, like her husband ran a tight ship.
Before you use our restroom, please put your phone on the table and just leave your passcode next to it. I'll just look through some of your mail.
So he cannot bring himself to throw out the letters, so he asks his mother to do it for him, and she says no problem. So she gets rid of the letters because he really did have deep feelings for that woman, but he's ready to build a life with Merle. Okay, after graduating, he gets a job selling life insurance for a Black-owned business called the Magnolia Mutual Life Insurance Company, and they moved to a town called Mound Bayou, Mississippi.
Mound Bayou.
Mound. I think the mound comes from, like, there were Indian burial mounds in that area, so that's where that name comes from. But
I wasn't thinking they were Viking ships. Not to make this a crossover show.
Or the home of like the Mounds Bar manufacturing.
Those are delicious.
Okay, Mound Bayou is in the Mississippi Delta. Let's just do a quick check.
So that's where he put his roots down. Like he was really Mississippian. Like he didn't come back from Europe and say, you know what, this place is backwards. I'm treated like crap. Let's move to New York. It's at least a little better there.
Great point, because that was the other, like I talked about the strategy of a Black person in relation, like, okay, what's my strategy going to be? I live under oppression and subjugation. And yeah, there's a big chunk of the population that says, screw this. We're moving to Chicago or Detroit or California.
Yeah, you can live at least like a normal person.
Yeah, that's called the Great Migration, and to me that is one of the themes. Medgar stayed. He was like, no, Mississippi is my place. Mississippi is my home.
Which you have to respect. I totally understand. It's easy to say you should leave. It's like, well, my family's always been here.
Yeah, his dad was a hard ass. He's a hard ass. But that said, Mound Bayou is in the Mississippi Delta, and that is a different part of the state from where he grew up.
Where is it in the state?
Mississippi Delta, I always thought
there's songs about it,
dude. Yeah. I mean, it's very rich in history. All the like Delta blues comes from that area, like Robert Johnson and Howlin' Wolf and Mississippi John Hurt or whatever his name is.
It's like the shacks, the juke shacks, and
the shacks. Well, anyway, you asked where it is. It's in the northwest part of the state, and it's sort of like in between, I think, the Mississippi River and like the Yazoo River or something. And great land to grow stuff, but incredible poverty. So he had grown up on the other side of the state, on the eastern part of the state, like central Mississippi. And, he was used to, what they said is that for Black families back then, you were either poor or you were poor, and he grew up poor, but Mississippi Delta, he's shocked when he gets there, and he's like out driving around and trying to sell life insurance policies to people. He comes home every night. He's like, honey, he tries to describe to her, he's like, this, it's almost like subhuman conditions, like the shacks that some of these people live in, and the state of like, just their sum total of belongings is, he's really shocked. And he starts to have qualms about his job. Like, he's good at his job, but he also is like, these people literally don't have money to put food on the table. Like, the last thing they need is a freaking life insurance policy.
Right. I mean, what are you going to do?
Even though when he shows up and he's dressed up and he's like, this really impressive, like people love him. They bring him in. They're like, yeah, we want to buy one of those policies. And back then they had all kinds of, like, slavery obviously is over, but the white Mississippians who are in power have sort of come up with a system that's sort of still like slavery, like sharecropping. And
Right. They say the conditions are almost worse because they're not obligated to like feed
not
people.
only that, but they're built to keep people in debt. And so they get the people deep into
Ugh.
debt, and it's almost like escaping slavery. There are people that have to get like smuggled out of there because they're in debt. They're not allowed to leave the area.
But I mean, that's why you're saying, like, how is this guy going to sell life insurance policy? Like, he'd be better off selling Mounds bars.
Yeah, he's able to, like, people will borrow, they'll add to their debt, but he doesn't feel great about it. And at the same time that he's doing that, he's like, he goes home to his wife. He's like, okay, just gather up all the extra anything we have and put it in my car so I can at least hand out stuff to people, as I'm going around. And then there's one guy who's like, yeah, I do have relatives up north. I'd love to get up there. I can't get at it. There's no way. So what Medgar does is he gets a coffin, an empty coffin, puts the guy in that, and then drives him, to the border or whatever. So in case they got stopped by cops, to get this guy out of Mississippi.
That's unbelievable. But hold on, before we go on, because I feel like this is an appropriate place to at least hear from our sponsor.
Oh, we got to pay the bills.
Got to pay the bills, and who better to pay our bills than Mary's? Let's hear from Mary's and then continue with the life story of Medgar Evers on the other side.
Sounds good. For a great meal at an affordable price, try Mary's Roadside Cafe on Route 3 at County Line Road. Summer specials include grilled trout, patty melts, and a really nice vegan chili. Mary's Roadside Cafe. Good people, great food, and a killer view of the valley.
Good that Mary is, still participating.
Yeah, Mary and her husband Ron. Mary's the nice one, but Ron is the one, in my experience, who serves bigger portions. And you might say, well, wouldn't Mary, if she's the nice one, wouldn't she be giving the bigger portions? Right. But like Mary, if somebody looks like, they don't maybe need that many calories, like Mary cares about her customers, whereas Ron will just keep shoveling the food down your gullet.
Yeah, Ron lets you order by weight. Ron's like, how hungry are you? All right,
he doesn't care.
We're going to take care of it. It's nice. I mean, you got to admire Ron's, level of specificity when it comes to portioning.
Okay, back to our friends and the great love story between Medgar and Murley, and him selling insurance in the Mississippi Delta and being shocked by the poverty. And then in 1954, a big thing happens in America. May 1954, the Supreme Court issues the Brown versus Board of Education rule.
I didn't know the year. Yeah, 54. That's a big one. That's
and
huge.
They ruled that racial segregation in public schools and universities is unconstitutional. That is a watershed moment. And I think as kids, when we learn this history, we think like, oh, that was good news. And the first Black kids who are trying to go to Ole Miss or trying to get that Brown versus Board of Education ruling really triggers the white Southerners. Like they are not having it. And, their feeling is, okay, go ahead and try to go to this school. We will beat you, or we will lock the doors of the school, or we will close down this school. And there are all sorts of strategies. But our friend, our hero, Medgar Evers, applies to the University of Mississippi, which is known colloquially as Ole Miss, for law school. He is rejected on a technicality, but it's really fundamentally because of his race. I mean, he's radically, more qualified than the people he's competing against. But in his battle to try to get in there, his lawyer is a young African-American lawyer, very smart, Thurgood Marshall, who will later... Hello.
Justice.
He eventually becomes the Supreme Court justice. But Medgar Evers gradually comes to the attention of the NAACP and sort of national leaders in the desegregation movement and the civil rights movement. So they say, okay, you didn't get into law school. Like, that's fine. Let's shake that off. But we have a job we would like to offer you. We want you to be the field secretary for the NAACP in Mississippi.
Now, it's not because he's the only one that was refusing to leave that area who like could actually do the job. You're staying, right? You're not moving to
Normally,
Chicago.
I would agree with you. Like if I got the job, that's
Right.
what would be going on. But
No, he's
no, this
obviously
is like the dude.
ridiculously
I mean, he
qualified.
was running
He's a
halfback. He was
superstar.
playing halfback at the Alcorn, college football team. So you may ask, what does the field secretary do? He's basically the eyes and ears for the NAACP in Mississippi. You know, like
He's not in a cornfield. He's not that kind of
exactly.
field secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah. This isn't Monty Python.
Well, I had the same thing. I was like, field secretary, is that like field general, like field general marshal or Rommel or
Right.
whatever?
It's just he has no one working under him. So no. You are the general. Everyone reports to you. There's no one here to report to you.
Life is just very hectic for him during that
Stressful.
time. And he's got to, walk arm in arm with James Meredith when James Meredith is trying to go to University of Mississippi. He's got to, when the kid from up in Chicago, Emmett Till, the 14-year-old who's
Emmett Till, so sad.
Yeah, he's visiting from
open casket,
visiting relatives from Chicago, and supposedly flirts with somebody, which he probably didn't even do. And
I think that woman just died.
Yeah.
The woman who accused him of whatever he whistled, or she just died.
Beautiful boy. When you see the photos of him before,
with the hat,
with the hat and just the attitude, and so he gets mutilated, he gets shot, he gets dumped and tortured, he gets dumped in the Tallahatchie River. And Evers, part of his job with the NAACP is to go investigate, get all the facts, interview everybody, all the black people in town, and also like interact with the mother. The mother is the one who made that famous decision that you mentioned, the open casket. She said, no, everybody needs to see exactly what was done. And then there are also people who are like, we maybe should start putting some of this stuff into newspapers or releasing it publicly so that people see. He runs lots of campaigns for the NAACP down in Mississippi. He at one time has a campaign to put pressure on gas station owners. One of the problems back then is they would sell gas to a black motorist, but they wouldn't let him use the restroom. And so he comes up just with a simple bumper sticker that just says something like, don't boycott gas stations where you can't use the restroom. And that runs afoul of laws which the white state legislature has passed, boycott laws, which say it's a crime to encourage boycotts. So then he changes the bumper stickers to, I shop for gas at places that let me use the restroom, or something like that. Then there's another famous case in Mississippi at that time is in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. There's a guy named Clyde Kennard who gets framed and wrongfully convicted for something and put into prison.
Sounds like a famous place, Hattiesburg.
Hattiesburg's such a great name.
Did something happen there? Was a book there? Was that like, was there some...
It's right on the edge of my memory. I want to visit there. I've never been to Mississippi. I applied to newspapers there too, never got the jobs. But so one of the frameworks that people sometimes have when they look back at the civil rights era was like, okay, MLK, nonviolence, Malcolm X, by any means necessary. And then we sort of group people like, were you more of an MLK guy or were you more of a Malcolm X guy? Medgar Evers loved Martin Luther King. I mean, absolutely admired him. However, he had grown up in Mississippi and he was like, there's just no way I'm not going to try. Whenever he drove anywhere, even when he was selling insurance, like he always had a gun in his car because his thing is like, he's his dad's son. Like you'd just be an idiot not to be able to defend yourself. So he always has a gun with him. And that continues during his NAACP times when he's driving all around the state and investigating stuff. He always has a gun, keeps it in the car. Now, his life is increasingly in danger. In the early 60s, stuff really starts to get hot. Is building up a profile. He's always the guy on TV, especially in Mississippi, giving sort of the black line or the black response, or, this is how we feel about this. And so by this time, he and his beautiful wife, Myrlie, have 3 children. And May 28th, 1963, somebody firebombs the house. Somebody throws a Molotov cocktail into the house.
What?
Nobody's injured, but his wife, and this is what makes it all the more impressive that he never does leave that state, and his wife, there's certainly times where she thinks like me, maybe we should consider going to work for NAACP in New York or, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a point of principle with him. Now, this is where our home is. We're not going anywhere. A couple weeks after that, he steps out of the NAACP office in Jackson, Mississippi. By this time, he's living in Jackson, and a car just comes speeding down the street,
Oh.
comes up on the sidewalk or whatever, and tries to hit him. And he just like throws himself back into the front like wall of the building and narrowly avoids
Oh
the
my
car.
God.
But he's really, his time is limited now at this point.
Oh.
Still going to work every day, still appearing on TV, still, filing his reports with the NAACP. But at this point, like, people want to kill him. Two of the groups that really got revved up after Brown versus Board of Education, and there's the KKK, which really gets reinvigorated, and then there's also something called white citizens councils, which spring up in municipalities all through the South. And the ones in Mississippi cannot stand Medgar Evers because he also his like vibe is never it isn't a Martin Luther King vibe. It's very like proud, principled, but also like impressive physically. Like he's an athletic guy.
Right.
He's strong, and it reminds me of his dad not backing down when the grocer said, "No, you actually owe this much." Medgar Evers, he'll never take a step backward. He's never going to diffuse a situation. He's like, "No, this is what's right." A couple of days after the attempted hit and run, there's a big speech that President Kennedy is going to give about civil rights, and he's going to sort of lay it out like, "Look, we're America. We're better than this. This is the way forward. Here's the legislation I'm going to introduce." The Supreme Court has ruled Americans of all races, of all religious beliefs, deserve the ability to go to school in public schools
Right.
alongside other kids. And a lot of Black Americans a lot of Americans, period, are watching it. It's a big deal back then. Like nowadays, it's like, the president said something on TV. And this is his big landmark address. And Medgar's still out working. The speech is during the night, but his wife watches it at home, and she's really excited, and she's like, wow, like this white man. She's very impressed by the speech. However, it is that night, just a few hours after this speech, that a member of the White Citizens Council in that area, a guy named Byron de la Beckwith. I mean, just a full-on racist. He's also a member of the KKK. He incidentally, is ironic because he shares some just basic biographical details with Medgar Evers. He too served in the military in World War II. And then he too came home and worked as a salesman. He wasn't selling insurance. This guy, De La Beckwith, he was selling like fertilizer and stuff like that. But this guy partly probably like, he already, despised Medgar Evers, but maybe partly hopped up by the excitement over the Kennedy speech. He goes and he camps out in the bushes right next to the Evers house. And then that night after midnight, when Medgar gets home, he's got like some t-shirts in the car that he's had printed up that say like Jim Crow must go, and he's just bringing things out of the car. Gets out of the car, and this guy De La Beckwith just shoots him in the back with a rifle. Medgar Evers staggers towards the house. He gets about 30 feet, slams into the wall of the house. The wife comes out and screams and calls for help. He's in bad shape. He's bleeding badly. They take him to the big hospital in Jackson, and he is denied admission because he's Black.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. But then they explain to the people at the hospital, this is the one exception you're going to want to make to that rule because this is Medgar Evers. He's on TV every night. You're not going to want to compound this. Like, you got to admit him. They admit him. They do what they, and dubious honor and just horrendous and tragic. But supposedly he then, thus becomes the first Black man admitted to a white hospital in Mississippi in history. However, he dies soon after his admission.
And did they catch this guy de la Beckwith right when it happened, or
They didn't catch him right at the scene, but, you know, it's a small world.
anyone know who did it? Yeah, Byron.
Yeah, and Byron's kind of bragging about it to his friends, and it's an open secret. And the outpouring and the national response is, you know, everybody releases their comments after Evers gets shot, because this is the very beginning of that string of assassinations I'm telling you about. This is 63. This is a few months before Kennedy gets shot. And so, you know, Kennedy releases his statement on it. Martin Luther King immediately makes his way to Jackson. There's a protest of 5,000 people in Jackson immediately after the death. The city's just filled with Black people who are enraged and sad. And this is the, you know, Malcolm X is still alive. MLK is still alive. Medgar Evers is the first of these like promising Black leaders who gets shot down.
Well, and you know what's going through their mind as they're mourning and sort of going and speaking out, you know, for Medgar Evers. They must know that their lives are always in danger.
Absolutely. We talk about the big heavy hitters and the leaders, but there's all these, you know, people whose names we don't know who showed incredible bravery, like trying to attend the local high school or showing up for the protest after Medgar got shot. So thousands protest in Jackson, including Martin Luther King. And then because he is a military veteran, he is entitled to a burial at Arlington National Cemetery with full honors. He does get the funeral there with 3,000 people in attendance. I'm glad you asked about de la Beckwith. They know it's him, but it's tough to get a white jury in Mississippi to convict him. He gets tried. He gets tried. Yeah. He gets tried twice and is not found guilty. He lives free and clear for 31 years.
No way. That is insane. Everyone knew he did it.
He gets to stay with his family. He gets to still be alive. He has a kid. He names his kid. He names his kid Delay, Delay. So that kid's name is Delay de la Beckwith.
Jesus.
But anyway, in 1994, so Medgar's wife, Merle, is also an incredibly impressive woman. And she, through the years, just keeps up the pressure. Like this is bullshit, especially as we get into the 80s and 90s. Like, this is bullshit. This guy's still walking around in this town. This is bullshit.
That is unbelievable.
She finally gets a prosecutor in 1994. So 31 years later, who says, yeah, you know, I think we could try him. Let's do it. That's the basis of that movie, Ghosts of Mississippi. That's about them coming back and how they mounted a case against this guy after 31 years. They do indeed get a conviction, and Mr. De La Beckwith gets thrown in prison, and he dies in prison, of natural causes. The other notable movies about that era, if you're interested, some good movie. There's Ghosts of Mississippi. There's the one you mentioned, Mississippi Burning.
Oh, was that was the 3 kids that went down? Like, was that based on that?
No.
Some other horrific killing.
The 3 kids, maybe it is. Those 3 kids were
like the freedom
fighters. There was a Jewish kid, right?
Yeah,
from New York or something.
Yeah,
that happens, and I think they get killed in 64.
Okay.
I mean, stuff was always popping off down in Mississippi. A more recent movie is Till. That just came out, and that tells you the Emmett Till story, and that got some awards last year. But it also gives a flavor of what Mississippi was like back then.
Right
now, Medgar Evers is mentioned in a lot of songs. Mm-hmm. There's a famous Bob Dylan song called "Only a Pawn in Their Game," and it's worth listening to. I mean, the thesis is sort of like this guy De La Beckwith. It's not even really about him. He's just a pawn in their game. And like it's a whole thing about how rich white people want to prevent any sense of working class solidarity,
right?
And they want to. The way they keep poor white people on their side is by saying, "Look, you're better than those black people. You have different color skin," and fomenting sort of strife. I don't love the song just even as a song, but I also don't love it's sort of like about De La Beckwith as opposed to Medgar Evers. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, I guess it's really about the dynamics.
But not pro De La Beckwith.
It's not pro, but it's still, and I have the same. So right after the killing of Medgar Evers, The
How
famous
old was
Southern
Medgar
writer,
Evers when he was killed?
he is 37.
37. Wow, that's so
Yeah.
young. Like, I mean,
All those guys, Malcolm, MLK was really young. The one that I mentioned, Fred Hampton, the one who's killed up in
right,
Chicago, he's
Chicago.
21. He's the one who came up with the concept of a rainbow coalition. He was the one who came up with the like, we have to form alliances with Native Americans, with Hispanics. We need to, the rainbow coalition. And that is the subject of whatever that movie was, like Black Judas. You know that one that
No,
came out recently? Anyway,
no.
okay. Other songs. Nina Simone, the
Yeah.
great African American singer, sings a song called Mississippi Goddamn. That's
Oh,
about the Medgar Evers killing.
okay.
The singer Malvina Reynolds sings a song called It Isn't Nice. That also references the killing. And then there's a good song that I had never heard, but I listened to it in preparation, by Phil Oakes. Do you know that?
No, I do not.
Singer from back in the day,
Nope.
kind of like a protest singer, but
Seems like there could be a whole album of these songs.
yeah, good point. Phil Oakes has a song that's worth listening to. It's called Love Me, I'm Liberal. And it's sort of satirizing white people who, just white liberals in the 1960s. The song stands up. As time goes by, like I said, the giants of the civil rights movement come to be seen as Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. However, at the time these events went down, the Medgar Evers killing was a big, big deal.
Did Kennedy say something about it?
Yes, Kennedy did say something about it, and he invited the widow up to the White House, and there's a photograph of her meeting with him in the Oval Office. And mind you, he's going to be killed in like 5 months himself, but him saying to her, "This is horrible. There's nothing I can say. I will tell you, though, that this is going to help us." The outrage, the national or even just worldwide outrage over this is going to help us pass this legislation that I want to pass. That's going to make a big difference for your people.
Yep.
And now it's ironic he's saying that to her, because really it's not just the Evers killing, but it's Kennedy's killing a few months later, which helps LBJ push through the civil rights legislation.
Unbelievable. They both played their part.
Let's wrap it up. I guess one more thing I will say, big bump. There's a big bump after Evers is killed in babies named Medgar. So you'll run into a lot of babies from early 60s named Medgar.
And his wife is still alive?
His wife is so impressive. She had not finished her 4-year degree at Alcorn because she got married. She got her she got the so-called MRS degree. She got married and did not finish. So when she's done, she says, screw that. I'm going to finish. But by that point, she's had it with Mississippi. She gets her degree from Pomona.
Wow.
And she is 90 years old now, lives in a retirement home out in that Pomona, Claremont area.
Wow.
And this year will be the 60th anniversary of Medgar's killing. That'll be in just a couple weeks here. The date of death was June 12th. So yeah, a couple weeks out. It'll be the 60th anniversary. And they have turned that house that they lived in into a national monument. So it's like a protected federal, national monument, that house, that carport where he was shot. One other thing I was going to mention, there's an right after the killing, the famous Southern writer Eudora Welty wrote a short story for the New Yorker that's worth reading. And it's sort of it's like the internal monologue that's going through De La Beckwith's head as he's preparing to kill him, and then as he kills him. And it's sort of an imaginative exercise in what led this man to do this. Again, I don't need to get inside Byron De La Beckwith's head. Like, that guy's a nasty piece of work. I wanted a short story about Medgar,
Well, you're not her publisher. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you have the right to say, hey, Eudora, this isn't what I wanted. If I would have commissioned you, I would have said I'd prefer a different story.
I'm still allowed to have an opinion.
You're a consumer. If you're paying for the art.
Yeah, and I pay for the New Yorker. I have my New Yorker
Absolutely.
subscription fee.
Yeah. And did he have kids?
Yeah. They had 3 kids, and one of them is named Daryl Kenyatta Evers, and that was because that was another thing that Medgar was paying attention to in, like, the 50s, was the move for independence in Kenya. He was really fascinated by that, and the black leader Kenyatta, and the fact that, in Kenya, it did take an armed rebellion. There was the Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya, and some killings, and some, and so, he thought, well, maybe that is what it's going to take in Mississippi. Having grown up in Mississippi and seen some of the shit that he saw in Mississippi, he thought, probably that is what it's eventually going to take. But as events transpired, it was actually the white use of force that ended up really kind of outraging the rest of the nation and bringing some of the, long overdue reforms into place. Medgar Evers, I didn't know anything about him. Incredible man. I mean, yeah, and it's inspiring.
I wonder if it's because Kennedy's assassination just trumped everything. And then it was like, well, wait, what happened to Medgar Evers? Well, hold on, what happened to Kennedy?
Yeah, very good point. And also, it's like one dude's the president, the other is the field secretary for the NAACP in Mississippi.
And there's so much confusion about that title.
Exactly. But you're right. I think that's a good point. The Kennedy thing is like, that's the one, at least for, that really is one where every American at that time can tell you exactly, who was alive at that time can tell you exactly where they were the moment they found out Kennedy was shot. I'm sure for Black Americans, they may feel that way as well about the Medgar Evers killing. And once he gets killed, Bob Dylan's writing a song about him, and
too many songs, maybe. It's not, you listed quite a few songs.
But the other thing is, I think it is the 1-2 punch of Evers' assassination, then Kennedy's assassination, that helps the civil rights legislation go through in 1964. So I'm not going to say all's well that ends well, because it's all horrendous. I mean, the stories about his childhood in Mississippi, it's horrendous.
Terrible.
But it's good to remember,
Yeah, no, great story, fantastic history. I will say that I'm not going to continue in this sort of theme of terrible tragedies from the 60s. Like, that's not going to become our new Killer Biographies theme. I'm not teasing next episode, but I'm just saying I'm not going to follow in that theme.
You're not going to tease the next episode?
Well, my tease is that I'm not going to follow in this sort of like, now we're going to cover famous assassinations of the 1960s.
Are you going to do another German girl who falls out of a plane into the jungle?
Seriously, I'm still getting people telling me like, whoa, that is an insane story. All right, well, let's play our outro music, and we'll have a new biography on Killer Biographies next week.
Fantastic.
Brainstorm.